aloha in our day. Spread a little aloha around the world at Breakfast with Bob.
Thank you, Poncho Man. Welcome, everybody, back to Breakfast with Bob, our not quite Kona edition. My name is Bob Babbitt, brought to you by Master Spas, as fuels go longer, Hoka Let's Fly, DeBoer Wetsuits, Premium Plus Sports, and, of course, our Challenged Athletes Foundation, our first 30 years. CF has now raised over $159 million, sent out over 44,000 grants to challenged athletes all 50 states, 73 countries, 105 different sports. And one of our multiple-time grantees, Mr. Zachary Friedley, joins us. Zachary, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. I love your backdrop. Obviously, somebody who loves the mountains a little bit.
Yeah, we climbed that with Romp 2 years ago. This is Cotopaxi, 6,000-meter peak in Ecuador.
So, born missing, leg above the knee, fingers from the right hand, and that always screams to me trail runner. I mean, right?
Yeah,
like the last thing you're going to be doing is going off camber, off road, narrow, all that type of crap when you're dealing with running with crutches and prosthetic legs.
Totally.
What gets you into that?
I think just the mystery of life. I went on like a vision quest when I turned 30, figure out what success was, and ended up in Northern California. Did some work with the shaman, went to India, reconnected to my body, and found myself in the great outdoors here in Northern California, and was on the trails, on the beaches, and ended up at this race called Born to Run in 2019, and ran my first ever trail race. It was 10 miles. And then the rest is history, man. A few short years later, I'm sponsored and running in the biggest trail races in the planet.
That's the coolest thing ever. So where'd you grow up?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh my God. And growing up in Kansas City, Missouri as a adaptive athlete, as somebody dealing with challenges, were you pretty much a lone wolf? There are not many other folks around there?
Yeah, I remember as a kid only maybe seeing other people with disabilities at the Shriners Hospital when I went to get my legs, which was, several times a year when you're a kid. But I wrestled, played football, baseball in my school. Definitely didn't see anybody else. Yeah, I mean, as far as I knew back then, it was like the late 90s. There was no Instagram or TikTok or YouTube really. So you didn't know,
So your parents obviously sound like type of people who are like, okay, Zach, you're the same as everybody else. Get out there and play every sport. There's no excuses in this household.
No excuses. No, I mean, if anything, my parents were pretty hardcore, especially in wrestling. I remember my dad sat me down at an early age and was basically like, look, if you want to be a really good in this sport, you're going to have to try harder than everybody. You're going to have to get your ass kicked. And keep showing up. It's not going to be easy. And at the end of the day, nobody cares that you are missing a leg. As harsh as that is, that's what they told me,
Exactly. Well, and that's really the way it is, right? Everybody's got a challenge of some sort. Yours is a little different. Now, back then, finding a leg or a sports leg, it's one thing to get your everyday leg, but finding a sports leg that would work for you, how hard was that?
I mean, I didn't even have a sports leg. I basically wore the old, it's like a wooden leg, man.
I was going to say, it's one step up from Captain Hook, right?
Yeah. And that's why I liked wrestling, is because I got to take my leg off and I didn't have to depend on a piece of equipment. And you just kind of made the equipment work out, especially like when I was in high school and I played football. It was nothing pretty. It was not even a hydraulic knee, definitely no blade. They padded it up so nobody else got hurt from me. But it was pretty ancient technology back then.
So when you're playing football, if you're wearing pads, people don't necessarily see the leg, right? So was it something where you can be a little invisible?
I think at first, and then people would pick up on it. I played on the defensive line and I was pretty small, and I would sneak through some of those smaller holes, and that would work a few times. And then they'd realize that, oh man, what's going on with this guy? And then they would like double team me and stuff.
And so out of college, did you get into running right away, or did that take a while?
Well, it took a couple of years. I was working with a prosthetics company that made my sockets because I aged out of the Shriners and
Right.
had to basically navigate it on my own as a young adult. My parents weren't involved in that at that point. So I was like 18 or 19 trying to figure it out. And back then, I think I just opened the phone book, looked for prosthetics, and went to the first place that was down the road. And they made me, back then was my first ever skin fit suction socket, which I never had before. And they hooked it up and it didn't really work out great. It actually made my mobility go from like playing flag football with my friends every Sunday to not being able to do that. And they basically just said, like, this is just your life. I wrote an email to the prosthetics company's like headquarters. They invited me to their headquarters to like figure out what was going on. And while I was there, that's when they gave me my first blade. They said, "Hey, you're a very athletic person. We have this blade. Do you want to try it out?" And I tried it out. It was like 6 months before the Beijing Paralympics,
Yeah.
and that was like my like entry into a blade and running. And that's what started me to seek trying to make a Paralympic team, which never happened, thankfully. But that was like my entry into the running world.
And so you're trying to make the Paralympics in running. That was a sport.
Yeah, track and field. Looking back, knowing what I know now, I was definitely arrogant about how I was training. I didn't have a coach. I just thought I could show up and make it happen, and really was just trying to prove my like self-worth through this, and crash and burn like hard.
So 2008, we're talking Beijing, we're talking Oscar Pistorius, we're talking that guy pretty much changed
Yep.
everything.
Yep. Back then it was Oscar, and then there was that guy from Canada, Earl Connor, who was in AK, was like one of the leaders
Yes.
in the AK field.
And whenever I've spoken to, when the average person out there hears AK, BK, they don't know
Yeah, they don't know.
difference, right? But when I talked to Rudy Garcia Tolson at CAF, and he's a double AK, I said, "What's the difference?" He goes, "Well, for us as an AK, a BK is we call that a paper cut."
Totally. Yeah, I try not to. I used to say that, but I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings these days. So I just tell people they don't know. I run with one knee, one human knee,
Right.
and then they can figure it out from there.
They can figure out how hard that is. So as an AK, and back in '08, your category was pretty well defined, right? Were you competing against other single above knee AKs?
Yeah, and then Rudy would show up to a track meet every once in a while and smoke us.
Yes. That kid is we've been working with him since he's like 7, 8 years old. Now he's 35 and he works for CAF. It's
So cool.
It's really been fun. Yeah, I know. So Paralympic, were you thinking about London as well?
Yeah, so went for London, but again, like especially training like I do right now today, I was nowhere near what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't really have a lot of guidance. I was a lone wolf. A lot of like prove it energy, and I wasn't like angry at people, but I was like angry at myself. A lot of tension, just going about it the wrong way.
So when you say that, going about it the wrong way, just not looking for assistance or coaching and just figuring I know it all?
I think maybe just not respecting like Paralympic athletes, and thought maybe even that they were like less than, and I was trying to be something. I was trying to like not be in that group. And I didn't classify myself as a disabled human until my 30s because I thought the word meant weakness or like you weren't good or like, bad. But it wasn't until I started doing that inner work with my shaman friend, Fred Mittauer, who does a lot of deep somatic work. And it cracked me open. And we went through a lot of traumas that were there from being a kid. Part of it's just being human, and cleared a bunch of that stuff up, created some space. And then I have a lot of new perspectives in life. And would you know that now I'm the best athlete version of myself ever.
Well, it's interesting. When I look back at people from that era, there was still a lot of, if you were an amputee, always wearing long pants. You didn't want
Totally.
people to know And nowadays, if I interview somebody, most of the time there weren't shorts. Most of the
Yeah, we're
time
shorts all the time.
kids got Iron Man on their leg, or it became a source of pride. Where back
Totally.
then, I don't think it was.
Yeah, it wasn't pride at all. You had to be a superhuman. Like even in wrestling, you had to like be a Superman to think that maybe you were worthy enough of respect or love, or I am enough is, a phrase that was circling when I started doing this work. And I remember even in a job interview one time when I was in my early 20s, I wore pants because I didn't want them knowing that I had a prosthetic leg, because I thought maybe they wouldn't pick me for the job because it was a physical job.
Well, yeah, that part of it is always been interesting to me, because when I look at our athletes, every time from when they're a little kid, every time they go out of the house, the spotlight's on you, right? You don't
Totally.
blend. You don't blend. So you have to make that decision that I'm embracing this
Yep.
or I'm shrinking from it. And it sounds like for a lot of the years, until you met the shaman, you weren't really embracing it.
Totally. I was not embracing it, and trying to distance myself from that, even from the community in general. And then that all changed in my 30s. And now I, interact with the community every day. And, we're trying to change trail running to be more inclusive and to get to categories and all of that stuff.
So talk a little bit about getting into trail running, because like I mentioned early on, when
Yeah.
you're when you're dealing with a prosthetic leg, trail running is not something that's natural.
Yeah. I mean, and even the kind of trail running I do, I would even classify it as mountain running. Trail running is a little easier than mountain running, but
Right. Yep.
I was at the right place at the right time, around the right people, listening to the universe and following these like breadcrumbs of adventure and journey. And I ended up being around the Born to Run crew, which is a famous book that came out in
Oh yeah.
2010. And that's the community that I was around when I started to uncover running. Um, and ended up being in Born to Run 2, the book with Christopher McDougall and my coach Eric Orden wrote. And I just love being in the outdoors. I loved exploring the outdoors on a trail, because when I was in my kid years and 20s, nobody told me that I could do this. And I would remember driving through national parks, just kind of looking out the window from the car, not really going up mountains. And then now in my 30s, here I am running 10 miles on a trail. And I just kept kind of exploring more and more and more, and until I started signing up for some pretty big races, and then getting sponsored, and then running in even more bigger races. And now it's my life. It's my 9 to 5. We train every day, and I put myself in position. Like last year, I lived in France, in Chamonix, and trained on my course for like 2 months before my race. So I knew every square inch of that whole route, knew where things were going to get dicey and how to game plan, you know?
So when you're talking about Martigny to Chamonix,
Yeah,
that's brutal, right? And the
brutal.
hard of taking a step back, when did you realize that running with crutches was going to be helpful?
Well, I use trekking poles.
Okay,
So
at
I don't
first.
use crutches, but I am going to use crutches actually this year for mountaineering. That's actually what I applied for my grant this year from CAF, is these side sticks crutches that I can use when I'm descending a mountain that have like a attachment for a glacier. But I use trekking poles, and trekking poles are like 4-wheel drive. It essentially takes a little bit of load off my knee. It gives me a little bit of extra balance in certain situations. And they come in handy, obviously, up there when you're going up huge inclines and going down huge descents. I think my race had almost 10,000 feet of vert last year. I
Wow.
think over a course of 42K, which my Strava ended up saying that we went 55K. So who knows how far we went.
Did you get lost?
Well, we kind of did get lost. So one thing I got to tell you about these mountain races in France is they're not as progressive with disabilities and adaptive athletes out there.
They could care less.
And yeah, they basically tried to kick me off the course from the last 10K, and they ended up pulling course markings out for us So we had to navigate with headlamps, and I had this Garmin GPS watch, and I had a little map on there, and we were trying to navigate that in the dark. You know, your brain doesn't work right, and when you're like passing the 8 hour mark.
Yeah.
So there was probably a little bit of lost. We went down some wrong ways, but we eventually made it to the finish line in Chamonix.
So they were pulling the course markings because they didn't want you on the course.
Exactly.
Wow. And that's UTMB?
Yes, it is.
What did they tell you afterwards when you said, wait, what are you guys doing?
Well, basically, there was no communication from the head office of UTMB because we've been working with them for a year prior to this.
Yeah.
Because my first attempt was in 22. I didn't make the cutoff. They weren't really set up for an adaptive athlete. And then we did a lot of work behind the scenes for a year. My sponsor helps me out with that. I'm on their pro trail team. And our trail manager, David Kilgore, is always right there in a lot of communications with me. And we had a big plan mapped out, and there was just lack of communication. They didn't communicate with the people on the ground. So honestly, after the race was finished and I had a recap meeting with them 2 days later, they had no idea any of that stuff had happened. And they were like really excited that I finished. And once I told them all that had went down, they were basically putting their hands in their face, or their face in their hands, and like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, you know. And then I can only think about, what about somebody who isn't sponsored by a big brand and has all this support? What if it's just somebody signing up that's just showing they're going to get eaten up and tossed out and maybe think that trail running ain't for them? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done within the UTMB, but I think that's what I'm here for.
You know, it's interesting. I was just the other day, I was with, I don't know if you know Willie Stewart, who's, you know, One Arm Willie.
I know. Yeah, I know of him. Yeah.
Yeah. So One Arm Willie, when he first went to Leadville, you know, they didn't want him to do the mountain bike, the 100-mile mountain bike, because he's missing an arm. And I think when he went to pick up his stuff, he stuffed his shirt. So it looked like he had two arms. But now he's done the event 13 or 14 times. But, you know, back then they didn't have arms that plugged into the handlebars either.
Yeah.
They didn't have prosthetic arms. For someone like yourself, you're a trailblazer. You're a pioneer in changing things. And hopefully the events will adapt and realize, you know, there's a population out here that would like to be doing the trails. Totally.
And I think, especially in endurance sports, you know, after your 20s, when the speed starts to go, you can, you know, transition over into an endurance sport like trail running. So I think for the generation behind me, they're going to have another avenue to go and continue the sport.
So your grant request, side sticks, forearm crutches, that's what those guys are called? Yep. Those are only a couple $1,000s, and
they're like 15 to 2,000 with all the attachments. But I climbed Kayambe last year with Kirsty Enos, who's an AK.
Oh, yeah, she's one of our athletes as well. She went to Mount Everest.
Yeah, she's awesome. And we were on a rope team together, and I saw her using those side sticks, and I'm like, man, I need to get me a pair of those. But they are pretty expensive. But I think they will change the game for me, especially on the descent. Yes, because I'm a weirdo, and I actually wear my blade up these mountains. Which other people wear hydraulic knees and like their walking stuff, but I wear my blade 24/7. So my gait and my brain and just my comfortability in it is right there. So I don't feel the need to switch. But when I am going down, there's no support on that right side. So my knee just gets throttled. So it'd be cool to have those crutches to offload some of that weight and protect my joint.
Well, and then that's our grant to you for 2024 is the side sticks forearm crutches.
Am I getting it? I don't think.
Yes, you are, my man. Yes, you are.
Sick.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that because you're changing the game. That's what it's about. Is you know what's funny is people don't realize, and it's not just people like yourself, but anybody who's paralyzed. The trails disappear, right? Yeah. Getting into the backcountry is something you lose a lot of times when you're congenital. But a lot of folks who get injured, the trails disappear from their lives. And with the advent of off-road e-assist hand cycles and the side sticks. There's so many new components that are allowing people to live the full life and get out there and enjoy the trails, which should be everybody's right.
Totally, man. And that's why I started a nonprofit as well called Born to Adapt.
Yes.
And we create disabled trail events all over the world. We just got back from New Zealand, where we did a running clinic with my coach, Eric Orton, who's known as the Born to Run coach. And we had a group of disabled athletes, non-disabled athletes, all working together. And then we did a trail race in the Redwoods there. And then I ran UTMB Tarawera 21K with an amputee. And I think we're going to grow the sport that way, by just getting people a little taste of it and show them that this can be done. And then they have something to train for. And before you know it, you'll see all sorts of people in these races, man.
So was it that the race we're talking about in Chamonix, 21K into the race, the blizzard?
Oh man, it was nuts, dude.
Rain, sleet, mud, everything.
Yeah, it was intense wind. I mean, it was one of the most intense conditions I think I've ever ran in my life. You couldn't really have good visibility up high. It was steep. I mean, you don't know a climb until you go into the Alps. You think you know what climbs are, even in like California and the Sierras and like in the Rocky Mountains. The ones in the Alps are just a different level. But that's why I trained there all summer. I was ready for it. I didn't care what the weather was. I just had a vision of crossing the finish line in Chamonix and was basically determined to do anything I had to do to make it happen.
What was the feeling like when you came across the finish line in Chamonix?
Honestly, a lot of relief. Like, damn, I'm glad it's over. But wow, like I just remember the year before how hard it was to get to that first cutoff, and I missed it by 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And there was still 38K to go. And I was just like, wow, like it's going to take so much to get to that finish line. But to finish it the next year later, you just see all that like space that you traveled like mentally and physically. And really it gave me confidence, like so much confidence, especially going into more races. I signed a 5-year extension with On after that. So I'll be racing these races through 28. And it was satisfying. I mean, it was just like, yeah, man, we did it. And it took a team. It wasn't just me, like I have a team of support from Dave Rotter Prosthetics to CAF to On to Buff to my wife, my coach. I mean, it takes a lot of people to get me to the start line.
Well, David Rotter was the star of our film on quadruple amputee baseball player Landis Sims called Landis Just Watch Me. Rotter was the total rock star, and he's now working with another baseball player, Parker Bird. There's certain guys out there who, in terms of prosthetists, who get it, who understand.
He's one of them.
He's one of them. If Zach wants to run the trails, it's not questioning. It's okay. Let's figure it out.
Totally. And I didn't start seeing him until June of 22. And that experience has changed my running, like to where almost my socket and running alignment is out of the equation. Like I don't really have any limb problems. Even after that day in Chamonix, I was out there for almost 12 hours in all kinds of crazy weather, wet, snow, mud. My limb didn't have a single mark on it, which you should know is insane.
Well, and the thing that you deal with is you've got one knee. That's got to last you the rest of your life. So
totally.
This piece of equipment that you're, in terms of a prosthetic leg and having the arm crutches, something to take that pressure off that knee is just huge.
Anything, especially over a course of 10 hours. If we change it by just 1%, that is a long way.
So talk a little bit about Born to Adapt, because obviously everybody needs a ringleader. Everybody needs somebody who's going to show the way through what you do, but also through, hey, if I'm doing it, you can do it.
Totally. And I think what Born to Adapt was when I had that first experience on a trail, and it was emotional. It was just like, wow, like, why aren't there more people with disabilities out here? Why aren't there more people with blades out here? We got to tell everybody. How come we're not advertising these races to our community? And I was around my friend, Luis Escobar, who's also part of the Born to Run gang. And he has this race called Born to Run. And he's like, Zach, why don't we do it? Or you do it? and I'll support you. I'll mentor you on how to be a race director. And that's where it started. It was on the Born to Run Ranch in Los Olivos back in 2022 was the first one. And we invited people to come be a part of this, trail event. And it's grown since then, where we've done 2 of those events. We've done some running clinics. We just got back from New Zealand where we did our first event.
That's cool.
And it's basically creating the space to come and be anybody you want to be in the outdoors, whether you're in a wheelchair, visually impaired, CP, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. Also, you went from 2000, was it 2019 that you first started running trails?
Yeah.
And you became a pro in 2021?
Yeah.
That's called making an impact pretty damn quickly. That's so fun.
Yeah, I was hungry, man. I've always had that competitive drive and didn't really have the direction. And now all the pieces are together. My internal self is really, aligned and running off of love instead of like anger and I'm not enough. And I feel like when you have all those pieces together, the potential becomes almost, you don't even know where it ends.
It's always fascinating to me is it's one thing to go out there and train and do the races, but it can be a little selfish, right? You're just putting the miles in. But I'm guessing for you, when you're getting kids and other adults reaching out who never thought they could get back into trails again, and now they are because they've seen what you're doing, that has to motivate you to do even more.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like the more races, the more mountains I climb, the more visibility I get, the more people that I can bring into this whole thing, and before you know it, it'll be normal to see somebody as an AK on a mountain instead of like, oh my God, like, why are you here? It'll just be like another day.
So I think people don't realize that the downhills for somebody who is an amputee, right, are just so they take what 3-4 times longer because you have to ease you can't run where most of us look, okay, we got to the uphill, now it's free speed, we're going downhill. No, you guys have no free speed. You can't take advantage of that downhill. You probably look forward to the uphills and the flats. I
do look forward to the uphill. I can pretty much go uphill with anybody, we've been training that, a lot. Flats are pretty much easy, but the downhill is where it's tricky and you got to work on your body posture and your technique. And you got to be careful because also there's a lot of consequences. There's some exposed cliffs and you can't be reckless. You can't let the ego drive. You got to just be centered, and be patient, So what's next? I got the Mendo 50K, which is my local race here, in Mendocino County. Then I got a big summer of the Golden Trail Series where I'll be running, Mount Blanc Marathon, Sierre Zinel, which is this race in Switzerland. It's pretty much the Boston Marathon of mountain running. It's a 31K with about 10,000 feet of vert. That's August 10th. That's pretty much my A race. It'll probably be a little bit harder than MCC was last year, just because it's got a brutal climb right out of the gate. And then you run this ridge with a lot of rollers, and then you drop down into the end. It's got a crazy cutoff. It's going to be super hard. But I mean, that's what the name of the game is,
Well, and that's where the founder of On is from, Olivier Bernhard from Switzerland, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I covered Olivier when he was doing the Ironman back in Kona.
Really?
He ran 2:41 for that marathon in Kona at the end of the bike ride a couple of times. He was top 10 a few times there.
Wow. Yeah, he's cool, man. I see him. I actually go to Zurich quite often. We do a lot of prototyping with different treads, and we do some events at the HQ there. So I see him quite often. It's a cool group there, dude. They're very, very awesome.
He's very special. Yeah, I just saw him at Challenge Roth last summer.
Cool.
Yeah, he's good people. I saw him somewhere. Oh, I saw him at Ironman World Championship in Nice. He was there as well.
Nice.
That is so cool. So again, you will be, I think the 28th, you'll get the notification that you're getting your CAF grant and the side sticks, forearm crutches, and hopefully they take you running to another level.
Dude, I've been dreaming about it. Ever since I saw him in action, I was like, man, I got to get a pair of those. And I've been dreaming about what my knee's going to feel like. It's going to feel a lot better after those big climbs.
I love it. Zach, thanks so much for taking time. It's really a treat to get to meet you. And hopefully one of these days we'll Have you been down for our San Diego Triathlon Challenge weekend?
Not in a long time. It's usually there's something going on in the trail world that same time. Oh, is it maybe the romp climb is around the same time?
Could be. We're actually this year, November 1st, 2nd, 3rd weekend. We moved it back a couple weeks.
So I haven't told anybody this, but I'm in the lottery for the New York City Marathon, and that's November 3rd.
Nice. Well, if you get New York City Marathon, that would be awesome. That would be
fingers crossed, dude. Fingers crossed. But
hey,
if not, maybe I'll come.
Have you ever done the Empire State Run Up?
I haven't, but I've been watching it. My friend David Kilgore, who's the manager of the On Trail Athletes, I think he's like one of the legends of it.
Nice. Because
hasn't Rudy done that?
Rudy's done it. We're the official charity for that event.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So we probably could get you a spot if you're up for that sometime.
I might be up for that. Can I ride the elevator back down?
Yes, you can. You don't have to go down, just up. That's why I thought you would dig that. Straight up.
I would dig that for sure.
And one of the other thing we got to get you over to Cat. Have you been to Catalina Island?
I haven't, but it's on the list. Didn't that just happen like a week or two ago?
We just had the marathon. I think I've run that marathon 20 times. There's points. Wow. It's like 4,000 feet of climbing. It's all fire road.
Yeah.
And there's points where there's ocean on all four sides. And it's just wild buffalo. It's a wildlife sanctuary. So there's buffalo on the course. You would love it. It's pretty spectacular.
My friend just won it, Tate Pullman.
Oh,
yeah. Cool guy.
That is very cool. Yeah. It's been around since I think 78. It's one of the earlier trail runs when it was just a marathon. Cool. Now we do a whole Triple Crown series with the half marathon in November, 50K, 50 mile January, and then the marathon in March. We
ought to get a big group of amputees out there.
You know what? I've always felt that should be, because I think it's a good course for amputees. Make that the self-proclaimed California State Championship for marathons.
For sure, that's what I was thinking. What a cool spot.
Great minds think alike, buddy. I think we should do some more with that event because I think it's really, because it's fire road. I think it's way better for someone like a Rudy or guys who are just getting going on.
For sure. Let's keep chatting about it.
I love it. Zachary, a pleasure to get to meet you. And thank you so much for coming on the show. Love what you're doing. Keep us in a loop on how we can help with growing trail running.
I will, man. I definitely appreciate it.
Zachary Friedley has been our guest again. This is Breakfast with Bob, our Not Quite Kona edition. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. See ya.